Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and if you hadn't guessed by the name of this video, this is going to be a bit of a touchy subject and a little bit more intense than I normally cover. So I'm going to kind of maybe reel back on the jokes, the comedy, the whole nine, and just go through this article. But then again, if something just absolutely golden comes to the top of my dome, forgive me in advance. Humor is how folks cope. Bill Maher says Tyre Nichols' California shootings prove America's culture of violence goes deeper than race. Bill Maher knocks the left for having a monofocus on race. Now here's the thing. I completely agree with this sentiment. I've been saying this for years. However, I want to say if you've not seen the Tyre Nichols footage, it is brutal. It is insane. There is absolutely no reason that the officers should have acted like this. There's of course stuff that we don't know, but at the end of the day, regardless of what we don't know, there was no excuse for how this went down. Let's go through the article. I'm going to give my commentary. We'll go from there. Real-time host Bill Maher said recent tragedies across the country prove the culture of violence goes beyond racial lines. Maher began the panel discussion Friday night by recapping the rage that had unfolded in the past weeks between the mass shootings in Monterey Park and Half Moon Bay, the release of body cam footage of the attack of Paul Pelosi, as well as the growing police brutality case out of Memphis. He noted that 2 older Asian men were responsible for the California massacre, while 5 black officers were responsible for Nichols' death. Yeah, I mean, already, race has always been a problem, will always be a problem. Throughout human history, racism has been a thing. However, the idea that it's intrinsically worse now than it's ever been is mind-boggling. That's just objectively false. The idea that so many of the current issues we have with our system is based on race is inherently false. It's completely due to culture, due to people, and I'm glad that Bill Maher, is someone who's renowned for his left-leaning opinions, is coming out and saying this, because so many people on the left, be it on the news, on Twitter, whatnot, are absolutely afraid or willfully ignoring or just can't tell through their optics, whatever the reasoning may be, this is not a race issue, that it is a culture issue. And obviously these are all tragedies. I mean, people like Anthony Jeselnik probably find a way to make this funny. I don't know if I'm talented enough to do that. So I'm just going to state the obvious that none of these should have happened. These are tragedies that shouldn't have happened, but I also cannot stand the media and the politicians making this about, gun control, making this about race, basically using tragedies like these as venues for political grandstanding. No politician gives a damn about Tyre Nichols. No politician gives a damn about the Lunar New Year massacre, anything that happened in California. They only care because, saying these nice, pretty words will possibly get me more votes and make me look good on Twitter and on the news and on the internet. It's an absolute travesty. Let's continue. We go through this ritual when we wait for them to announce the race of the shooter, because somehow to a lot of people that's the most important thing, Maher said, and I just thought it was very interesting that this week Asians were killed by Asians, 2 Asian men who are, 66 and 72, and then this week we just got this video of the Memphis 5, a black man is brutally beaten in Memphis by 5 cops. They're all black. And he is entirely right about the race of the killer or the shooter or the one doing the crime. I do the same thing, mainly because I want to see how the narrative is going to be twisted. Not saying it's an excuse or anything. I'm just saying I want to see how the narrative is going to be twisted. When the YouTube shooting happened several years ago, it was like radio silence. They announced, it was a shooting at YouTube, at the YouTube offices, but they did not announce, at least it took a very long time for them to announce, that the shooter was a woman, she was using a handgun, and she was of, I believe, Pakistani or Persian descent. Either way, she wasn't white, she wasn't black. The point is, it took a lot longer for that to come out. There's been several stories like this where if it doesn't fit the official narrative of angry white guy with an AR-15 or whatever, then it doesn't count. It doesn't come out. The news doesn't care. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but that gay nightclub massacre that happened in, I believe, Florida several years ago, wasn't that individual Latino? So yeah, I wait for it to come out because the media and the news, they have this way they want to spin a particular narrative, and when in all reality it's all bad. It all needs to be covered equally. But politicians and the media seem so scared to say something like, this black individual caused a crime, this Latino individual caused a crime, this Asian individual caused a crime, because they're looked at as racist if they point that out. No, you're reporting on a story of something that happened that's very indicative of what our culture is going through right now, and statistics like these are important, because if everyone goes about their day thinking, oh, all crime is committed, by this demographic with this particular weapon in this particular manner, they think they're safe. They start targeting a certain demographic, whatever it may be, and it's not good. We need facts out there. We need the truth out there. And I'm glad this is coming out, because it is important to know. I never want to say, I never want to give credence to, like, the names of the killers or anything to that effect, because, that gives them power. You got people like the Columbine kids all the way back in the day who idealized certain individuals they ought not have idolized, and that's going to be a vicious cycle. You've got people who, I want to be the next Ted Bundy. I want to be the next insert somebody who did something awful here. So naming them, not good. But giving out the demographics, giving out the method of the killing, or any major dangerous crime, yeah, I think that's probably a good call, because people need to be aware that these sorts of issues are happening, and there's not exactly an assembly line checkbox that's just going to magically, be the narrative. It's not always going to be a black dude with some gang-on-gang violence with a handgun. It's not always going to be a white guy with an AR-15, who's repressing his homosexuality or whatever. There's all sorts of avenues for violence, and they all need to be reported on equally, at least when they're to the degree of something like this, or the degree of that Florida gay nightclub killing all those years ago. Like, it's all equal, in my opinion, equally bad. I guess what I'm asking is America's culture of violence. It does go deeper than race, right? He asked. And I think this monofocus we have on race is short-circuiting us, trying to fix some of the realer problems. Yeah, race is an easy catch-all blanket. It's so easy to nail it down and say, oh, this is happening because of racism. Oh, homeboy did it because he was white, or this guy did it because he was black. It's such a lazy, in my opinion, way to report things, and it removes all nuance. Like Tyre Nichols. Right now, the official story that's being, that's floating around there is that these officers pulled him over for reckless driving. And maybe that's true, but I'm sure there's more to it than that, because you don't have 5 officers pull over a single individual, a single individual in the car, and then all go to town on him for reckless driving. Like, there has to be something more. I'm not going to get all conspiratorial. I'm not putting on a tinfoil hat, but 5 officers on one guy is abnormal, unless that person has a weapon, unless there's already been 911 called. There's situations that call for multiple officers, but a regular traffic stop, which is what the articles and information we have as it currently stands states, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm rather familiar with how the police do things. I mean, granted, I get it, this happened in a very big city, but even so, my grandfather was a cop in Detroit in the 70s. They were not allowed to go out in, patrol cars alone, because, you were going to die. That's how bad gang violence and everything was back then. And it wasn't even black on black. I'm talking like mafia, stuff like that. Detroit in the 70s was a bit of a shit show. But, that's what, 40, 50 years ago? Even by modern standards, I talk to a lot of individuals. I get how the police works. I enjoy learning about that sort of thing. This was not normal. Now, are there pre-existing conditions that had all 5 of these officers together? That why were they already all aggressive? Is there something that happened off camera we haven't seen? Something that would sway the story? It's possible, but as it currently stands, this was not normal operating procedure. Something is being left out. Former Rep. Tim Ryan, D. Ohio, responded by expressing hope for deeper discussions about mental health, guns, and cops in the United States. Meanwhile, Barry Weiss at the Free Press quipped that basically every weekend in Chicago should be classified as a hate crime due to the constant black-on-black violence that plagues the Windy City. And yeah, what happened here was basically, an every weekend thing in Chicago. However, and every weekend in Chicago, it's actual, gang violence or crimes that are, worthy of maybe this sort of interaction. What happened here was they pulled the guy over for a traffic stop, and they immediately got aggressive and went to town on his ass. We hear about a horrible incident, and we wait to see the race or identity of the perpetrator, and the race and the identity of the victim, and we know exactly how it will play based on that. But if the family of the person that's murdered doesn't matter, Weiss asked, I don't really think it does. It's also misleading. It's misleading that everything is always racial, Maher responded. I feel like this is one of the big flaws of the left these days. They have this monofocus, again, when the education system breaks down, people don't know a hell of a lot, so they focus on something that's very obvious, black and white. Everyone can understand racism, and of course it's still a real thing in this country. It's just not the only thing. Right, Weiss said, and black life should matter if the perpetrator of the crime is white, and black life should matter if the perpetrator of the crime, as is often in a city like Chicago, is black. I don't think that Barry Weiss is saying anything out of the... Man, Barry Weiss has gotten fat. Oh my god. She used to be moderately attractive. What happened? Sorry. Again, humor to cope, but that's a real observation. Barry Weiss used to be moderately attractive, if I remember right. She's gotten a bit tubby. Weiss predicted the body cam footage from the Tyre Nichols death was going to be as horrible as what the authorities have said. Real Time was taped before the Memphis police released the footage. He hoped the takeaway is not the takeaway of the summer of 2020, referring to the defund the police movement. The LAPD is losing 50 police officers a week right now. You call the LAPD, they will not show up for 30 minutes, Weiss said. Again, with the woke, who pays for that when there's less police and less competent police? Maher asked. A lot of people of color communities where they want more policing. And I mean, yeah, that's probably true. I don't know if that's the case, but that's probably true. There are a lot of communities out there that are heavily black, heavily Latino, whatever, that they're having their stores broken into, they're having really negative things happen, and there's no police force, be it because there just aren't enough police around, or because police don't want to come to that area because they've got such a bad reputation because they'll be attacked on sight for just being in blue. That being said, police are part of the problem too. When you got cops out there doing things like this, and it seems like it's becoming more and more normal, I'm pretty libertarian type of individual. I don't like the government. I don't like the power. I want this stuff decentralized, and I think that don't get me wrong, the majority of police interactions are probably going to be good interactions, but the fact of the matter is, it's still a government thing. It's still an authoritarian control thing, and it's not something I feel like I want to touch on too much. Something I don't want to say I'm full defund the police because you'd have to replace it with some system, and I'm not a smart enough individual to know what sort of system you could replace it with that would actually work. But I also think that in its current setting, yeah, this doesn't work. This isn't good. I don't think Tyre Nichols is another case like George Floyd. I think there actually is adequate cause to believe that there's more behind the George Floyd stuff. He did have a bunch of stuff in his system. The autopsy came out later to reveal. It seems like there probably was a whole lot more than just one cop being a bad cop. But be that as it may, there's got to be something we're not seeing here, because this is not how routine traffic stops go. Even with just 1 or 2 officers, there were 5 here, and they were aggressive from the get-go. If you've not seen the body cam footage or the overhead traffic footage, I highly recommend you watch it. It is incredible. But yeah, that's about it for this one. I figured I'd stop talking about Dungeons and Dragons for a day to cover a story that is really intense, and I think that what Bill Maher says makes perfect sense. We are hyper-focused on race in a way that we really shouldn't be, because there are far larger issues than making up how negative race relations are and how bad race relations are. All these cops that busted this dude were black. All the Asians that killed the other Asians were Asian. There's a violence culture that it's not being perpetrated by violent video games. Like, that's not, don't get on that whole right wing from the 90s shenanigans stuff. But there is something that's a problem here that needs to be looked at, and we should stop focusing so much on race and racial division and maybe figure out an antidote to this sort of chaos. But that's just my opinion. Let me know yours in the comments below, or you can let me know on Twitter. You can follow me at BoltTheWord. Normally this is the part where I would chill and ask you guys to subscribe to the channel, check out the back catalog, stuff like that. It doesn't exactly feel right in this video. You don't have to like this, you don't have to subscribe, none of that. This is just something I felt I need to be out there, and there's a sort of ideological war going on that, takes precedence over anything that's, woke or whatnot going on in the gaming space or the nerd culture. So I think I'm going to leave it at that.